Welcome back to the Iowa blog here in the library studio. It was just a little over an hour ago that we completed the previous program on the last word picture regarding the behavior of our beloved Dowd, our King, chosen one, Messiah, Son of God, and Savior during his most deplorable moment. And I'm going to return to that text. It's presented in 2 Samuel 11 and in 12. And then we're going to, in another program, hopefully, we'll push this off until tomorrow, perhaps. We're going to turn to the 51st Mashal, which is Dowd's retort to God. It is with a very heavy heart that I cover this material. I know many of you commented on the last show, and I have not had the opportunity to look at those comments at this point. I was actually more motivated for the solution. I'm pretty results oriented as a fellow, and so as I read through this, I am motivated to find where's the solution, because this is really bad. And we can't leave it like this. So what I did is I realized there's only one text in the entirety of the Torah, prophets, and Psalms that would resolve this dilemma that Dowd was in. It happens to be my favorite of all, by far. And I wanted to spend the time between these programs analyzing the name of the fellow that delivered it. And what I found is exactly what I had been led to conclude. And I can't wait to share that with you, because from that perspective, it's an extraordinary revelation, and it is the resolution to all of this. So as I go through this, again, this is going to be one of at least 3 and maybe 4 programs that are gut-wrenching, because we recognize who Dowd is, that he's the one who fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim. We wouldn't be here without him. He would return to Yah. He would eventually get back up. But it's going to be a while. He is going to be down for years before he restates his and reclaims his position with God. Now, for those who may not have an appreciation as to why I went here, it is really severalfold. The first is that it's dominant. It's presented in great detail in Samuel, Listen to God, 2 Samuel 11 and 12. And the events that follow in really 13 through 20 something are all a derivative of this. So it's pervasive in the text. God didn't turn away from it. And we have never run from anything in the 24 years we have done this. We've, though, picked our battles so that we turn to them at the proper time. And I think this is now the proper time, after we have burnished Dowd's resume, and appropriately so, for us to consider why he is and has been rejected by so many, and why it was so easy for Christianity to tear him down. He made that possible, which I think is the greatest grief of all to God, knowing what would happen as a result of this. And God chose not to cover it up. He wanted it revealed. He revealed it. And so we're going to deal with it. The other reason is, of course, that in Judaism and Christianity, the excuse for their replacement messiahs it's all based on this event. We don't give that more credibility by presenting the basis for it, but we look like cowards if we can't deal with it. We are never going to run from something. And ultimately, it is the timing that is so vital to us, because when we returned to the narrative in the garden and we realized that God caused the fall of man, and then realized the things that God expressly stated that he was expecting from us, wanting from us, to release us from this planet so that we could experience the universe with him. We came to see, and now I've found many affirmations of the fact that God's interest is not in us being perfect. There really is no Hebrew word for that concept. And when I have rendered it in the past, it is by just superficially reporting what the lexicons and Hebrew English dictionaries say. But what they say was only to echo religious terminology and religious texts. The word tamim doesn't mean perfect. It's based on tamam, the verb, and it means to complete the job, to finish what one starts, to fulfill what needs to be accomplished. And Dowd did those things. And because he did those things, he is tamim. And therefore he was qualified for the very reason he got back up and got going again. So there is a happily ever after ending to this story, but for the story to be real, it has some gut-wrenching details, and this is all part of them. So now, after we have learned that Dowd was sleeping during the day, abusing alcohol, turned into a voyeur at night, determined that a woman that he thought was pretty belonged to another man and abducted her anyway, and then immediately had sex with her, which happens to be the textbook definition of rape. The fact that he then tried to cover it up and was gluttonous in the process. The fact that he had a man assassinated and then turned his general into a co-conspirator in murder. The level of depravity that was in the letter that he wrote to Joab to get the light of Yah extinguished. That was the man's name, Uriah. It's, quite frankly, it's debilitating. So here's how the story continues. We're in the 26th statement of the 11th chapter of 2 Samuel. It means to listen to God. The wife of Uriah heard that her Baal, her husband, the light of Yah, perished. She wept, mourning over her Baal, Lord and Master. It never suggests that she knows that he was murdered or that Dowd was the one who committed the crime. When the Ebel, the ceremonial mourning ritual, had passed, then Dowd sent out, and he, Asaph, gathered her in as if harvesting her to his house. She became his woman. She had a child around him, a son. From the perspective of Yahweh, Dowd, remember I told you to recall this word as a verb, ra'ah? But from the perspective of Yahweh, Dowd, ra'ah, had consistently been wrong. He had habitually been distressing and harmful, even evil, in the things he had said and done. 2 Samuel 11:27. So if you think that I'm overstepping my bounds and criticizing our king, you can never be wrong if your conclusions match those of Yahweh. When it comes to criticizing our compatriot, the king, even now as I recognize him as my adoptive son. I'm, of course, hesitant and I'm uncomfortable, particularly recognizing all that he achieved on the positive side of the ledger. But at least I know that I'm in good company and correctly processing the evidence when Yahweh concurs. Moreover, I'm rather certain that what I've already said to his face and will say is far beyond what I've shared here. Just as Dod told Joab that there would be no perception of ra'ah, wrongdoing, Yahweh said otherwise, that the whole rotten affair had been ra'ah, despicable from the outset. And let's be clear, Bathsheba, she is no Amma. So, guess who were no longer on speaking terms? Yep, Yahweh delivered his condemnation of his son via an intermediary. When Yahweh sent Nathan means gift, to Dod, which means beloved. He came to him and he said to him, there were two individuals in a particular city, one rich and powerful, and the other one was poor. This is the beginning of 2 Samuel 12, the first verse. The exceedingly wealthy one had excessively large flocks of sheep, as well as herds of cattle. The poor person had nothing except one little lamb, an insignificant ewe, which he had acquired, and he sustained and nurtured her life. She grew up with him, becoming tremendously valuable to him, even appreciated by his children. When together, a morsel of his food, just crumbs and scraps of his, she ate. She even drank from his cup. She would lie down and rest in his arms. She became like a daughter to him. A visitor who was traveling came to the rich and powerful man, but he showed no compassion and was unwilling to take one of the lambs in his flock or cattle from his herd to do something for the traveler who had come to him. Instead, he grasped hold of and took the ewe of the poor person and prepared it for the man who had come to him. Now, note to self and to all who are listening, don't ever try to match wits with Yah. There was no wiggling out of this. But what's amazing to me is the empathy Yahweh expressed and the extent that he went to teach his wayward son a lesson, one that he might understand, although at this point he didn't. As for Nathan, he is announcing the gift of Dod, the beloved son, given in Yeshaya 9 to redeem mankind's fractured relationship with God. So by that time, this had been resolved. It just wouldn't be resolved for many years after this transpired. Dod would be the lamb, and the one sharing this with you is the bull. Working together and collaboratively with Yahweh, once resolving this mess, we foster reconciliation during the Mikra of Pesach, and then on Teruah. The emotional portrayal of the lone lamb one acquired when it was very young, then nurtured and sustained, becoming a beloved child, cradled in the arms of the one who adored it. in the presence of a grateful family who was then taken away and prepared to meet the needs of a newly arrived guest. Of course, is the portrait of Dode's eventual fulfillment of Passover. When he, I should say, mans up, accepts his place, and shows some compassion for others, he will be that lamb. And for those who prefer hindsight to foresight, this is emblematic of the validation of the covenant narrative with Yishak and Abraham. Remember, they ascended Moriah to celebrate Passover right here on the same place on Moriah, albeit 1,000 years earlier, at the time when Yahweh promised that he would provide the lamb. Well, that was enduring and brilliant. I'm bewildered that Dode was so slow on the uptake. But then again, I suppose that his mindset was different at the moment, and we benefit from knowing how the entire story plays out over the next 3 millennia, which he did not process at this time. So this was the second occasion in so many words that we have been told that Dode had a wicked temper. It is part and parcel to being impulsive. So Dode's temper, it was inflamed, and his rage was aroused tremendously against the man. Then he said to Nathan, "As Yahweh lives, surely the son who did this deserves to die. And in addition, he must restore the lamb and repay fourfold his as recompense, because he did this thing, and also because he had no compassion." Then Nathan said to Dode, "You are that man." At the moment, you could have heard a snowflake fall. The silence between these men and their God would have been deafening. And of course, we would do well to consider the expressions on the faces and thoughts now whirling in the minds of the gift and of the beloved. Frankly, while Nathan's lips were moving and words were spilling out of his mouth, I doubt Dode processed any more than the first and last statement of what follows. "Thus says Yahweh, the God of Israel, I anointed you, Messiah, to be king over Israel. I rescued and delivered you from the hand of Shaul. I gave to you the house of your Adon, your Lord, and your Lord's women into your lap. And I gave you the house of Israel and that of Yehudah. And if this were too little, this were insufficient for you, I would have added to it, giving you the like of it, and so much more." 48 years prior to this stern admonishment, Yahweh had not only anointed Dode as the Messiah and appointed him the future king of Israel, he had given his beloved his spirit. God had chosen a young lamb, and he nurtured and raised him as his son. He is entrusting his people to him. The fight for validation and supremacy between the Benjamite Shaul and the Yehud Dode is among the most unheralded of all prophetic portrayals. It is analogous to the Benjamite, of course, by the same name, the one who was also demon-possessed and who not only wanted Dode dead and buried, but was willing to misappropriate the Torah to achieve his deadly schemes. This is the battle of the ages that Yahweh is discussing between man's most popular religion and the relationship Yahweh sought to achieve through his Son. And God has taken sides against Christianity and in support of the covenant. Now, Yahweh is just not in the business of accommodating men. And the dissertation upon the exit from Eden, he made it unambiguously clear that we would have to work to survive. But occasionally, God will make an exception, at least to the extent that he will augment what his covenant children could achieve independently. He will do this so that we have the time and resources to pursue the family business. So Dowd was the supreme beneficiary of this arrangement, the ultimate exemplar. Yahweh is affirming that he received a palatial home filled with women to keep him company. But he was also afforded his father's most valued treasure, Yisrael and Yehudah. Having tried it himself and been so soundly rejected, God was keenly aware that there is no more difficult job than representing him and speaking for him. Moshe was eminently qualified and marvelously supported, but he didn't make it through the first year before he snapped, and he begged Yahweh to relieve him from duty. Yahweh met the challenge by providing additional support and supplies. Although there were occasional missteps, Dowd managed to stay on course for 48 years before he opted out. In appreciation of what his son had and would achieve, God is not only on record saying that there was no limit on what he was willing to provide, even if it was nothing more than additional houses and women, or as valuable as his anointing, protection, and people. But there is a right and a wrong way to go about this potential equation. Our Father isn't going to opt in when we opt out, nor is he going to lavish gifts upon us when we have no appreciation for their value, nor value the relationships that makes all of this possible. We are at liberty to accept or reject the word of God. Most despise Yahweh's testimony because, of course, it is contrary to their religious beliefs. But that is not what is happening here, because Dowd was not being religious. He isn't showing contempt for the Torah instructions because they are in conflict with his plans to impose his authority through religion, as was the case with Paul, Akiba, and Muhammad, priests, rabbis, and imams. He knew what God said. He just chose to reject his Torah guidance for the fleeting satisfaction of wine and women. God took it personally, as he should. Why, he asks, and on whose account have you despised, showing such contempt for the word of Yahweh, such that you did such raw, evil, wickedly troubling, and horribly wrong in his sight? You struck down the Uriah, the light of Yah, the Chitty, the formidable one, with the desolating sword. And his wife you have taken to be your woman. You intentionally slaughtered him with the swords of the sons of Ammon, the sum of the people. 2 Samuel 12:9. It's a choice that we're all asked to make. God's way or man's, relationship or religion. It is the option offered long ago with the Etz Diath of Tob and Ra, is it not? This referendum is presented in the word of Yahweh, also known as the Torah. In the opening chapter of the Torah, God revealed that Dod would be the Gadol Mayor, the greater luminary. He is, as we shall soon be reminded, equated to the sun. And so by slaying Uriah, Dod extinguished the light of God on earth. The Choreb, this desolating sword, is a double entendre because it was upon the sharp, craggy summit of Mount Choreb that Moshe and the Israelites were first introduced to the Or, the light of Yahweh. And this is when the children of Israel were especially raw, malcontent, and malevolent in his sight. Always the ultimate weaver of words, with this rue originating over a woman, Yahweh would resolve it likewise. While Dod had killed a man for her, God would save his son and the world through her. It's the ultimate contrast between the Amom, the sum of the people, and the Torah teaching of Yahweh on behalf of the Bereth, the covenant, through the Moedim, restoring witness. The choice between these approaches is life and death. Dod, of course, he knew better, but he had chosen poorly. There would be a consequence. God cannot be capricious. Even with his great love and favoritism for his chosen one, his anointed, his son. There must be some adherence to the rules that he had established. And so we read, therefore, now, the sword shall never be removed from your household. Never, throughout time, as an everlasting witness, as a result, because you have shown great contempt for me, thinking so little of me, that you have taken the wife of Uriah, the light of Yah, the Chitti, formidable one, to be your woman.
Ouch.
God is saying that your perception, Dod, of him was reduced to having sex with a married woman. That's how much you valued me, God said. You have shown great contempt for me. My friends, this condition would endure 3 millennia without respite. It's ongoing even now. It's about to get much worse. And it will not be resolved until Teruah, when the bull and the goat intervene on Moriah and before the surviving remnant of Yisrael. That is the lesson of the Ed, the eternal testimony, delivered by this restoring witness. All Yisrael would become Dod. They still are. Israelites and Jews think so little of Yahweh, they've erased his name and replaced his Dabarim words with their own. They continue to fight a losing battle with diminishing returns for their very survival. Rather than thriving, they have and they will continue to die, with more over the next 7 years than ever before. The immediate and specific fulfillment of the following pronouncement was by way of Daud's son, Absalom, who led a devastating coup against his father, culminating with the rape of the king's concubines. But to some extent, it is also prophetic of what Shaul Paul would do by replacing Daud with his counterfeit Jesus, so as to blot out the son. This is what Yahweh says. Pay attention. I will raise up against you a Ra'ah, a miserable, malcontent, and malignant shepherd out of your household. And I will have your women and wives taken away before your eyes and give them to your foul-mouthed and maniacal fellow countrymen. Then he will lie down with your wives and women in Ain, the sight, the eyes, and perceptions of this Shemesh son. Throughout the Torah, the Nabaim and Mizmor, Daud is equated to the sun, while his herald is the moon, reflecting his light. But at this moment, with the assassination of Uriah, the light of Yah, Yahweh's greatest luminary, had quenched his energy. From the beginning, the king tried to hide his complicity, covering over his crimes, but they became so monumental that he wasn't fooling anyone but himself. God, however, is a beacon of light. Even in the darkest hours, he deals his cards face up in broad daylight. And in so doing, he is acknowledging that his son represents the sun. This will be 2 Samuel 12:12. This is because you did this while hiding, veiled in sly secrecy. However, I will act carrying out this message in front of all Yisrael and before the sun. When I read that, I knew that we were doing what we needed to do. God exposed his response and his intent boldly for all to see. And in so doing, we are wise to follow his example. And we are. Had God responded, I should say, any other way, he would have also destroyed his credibility. You see, he established the parameters of the covenant in his Torah, and now he himself must adhere to them. He cannot remain trustworthy and reliable if he alters the rules underlying life as we are living it. And so over the remaining 14 years of his first 3 lives, Daud would face the consequences of what he had done. Further, while he was right to admit that he had chata, incurred the resulting guilt for having missed the way, confession did not absolve him, nor will it anyone say, I'm sorry, after robbing a bank and killing a guard. Well, that's only going to serve to hasten and assure your conviction. So Daud said to Nathan, I have chata'ah. I have missed the way, gone astray, and incurred the guilt and resulting loss for having been offensive against Yahweh. Shemuel 2:12-13 in part. Well, it was an admission of guilt. It wasn't an apology. It didn't resolve the problem. Good men were dead, and an overly indulgent and irresponsible man had stolen another man's wife when he had already paid, he had already collected, I should say, a different one for breakfast, lunch, and dinner 7 days a week. Worse, he had not only embarrassed Yahweh, who had placed so much trust in him, he had put God in a untenable position. You see, without Dowd, the sun, it doesn't shine, and all life ends on this planet. And right now, the sun was being eclipsed by a very dark and foreboding cloud. Without resolution, Yahweh wouldn't be able to direct or trust his son with the fulfillment of Pesach and Matzah, resulting in Bikurim. Should the spring Moedim not be fulfilled appropriately and on schedule, all of the remaining would go unanswered, wouldn't they? There would be no Shavuot harvest. There would be no Teruah, no Kippurim homecoming, and no restoration of the planet and return to Eden on Sukkoth. The entire human experience would be over. Fortunately, Yahweh arranged a solution. It began with a woman who would resolve the problem a woman had caused. This is the resounding and overriding message of the last word picture, the final mashal. And really, it resonates throughout most all of the mashal proverbs. And through the Mizmor and the Nabiim, the reputation of the greater luminary would be restored by the lesser luminary, with the tree of knowledge pointing the way back to the tree of lives, and of a husband and wife, a mother and father working collaboratively to save their adopted son. The message Yahweh delivered through Nathan was a preemptive strike against Shaul's sinister religious ploy. Dowd had buried himself, but his soul would never die. And to assure that his and ours would live, Yahweh would arrange for his son to fulfill Abar, Passover, offering his Bashar body as the beloved lamb of this story. The relationship would be reconciled. It reads, "Then Nathan replied to Dowd, 'Nevertheless, Yahweh Abar will one day pass over your chata'ah, guilt, through your purifying offering. You will never die.'" Boy, every word laden with portent. Now, there are a couple of lessons in particular that I want to reinforce. First, while Dowd had demonstrated that he was not a perfect lamb by religious standards, it now becomes blatantly obvious that Yahweh defines tamim differently. You see, as we know, when God is speaking of the fulfillment of Pesach here, clearly stating that he's going to fulfill Pesach by interjecting a bar. That's its verbal root. And it's the answer to death. Tamim, the word carelessly rendered perfect, has an actionable root too. Just like a bar is the actionable root of Pesach. It is tamam, and it speaks of finishing, not of being flawless, of completing the mission rather than standing idly by and not incurring guilt. Therefore, Dowd became the tamim lamb when he re-engaged after re-establishing his relationship with Yahweh and earning Yahweh's trust. completing his calling by fulfilling Chag Matzah. When his Bashar body was sacrificed as the lamb, he opened the door to eternal life for himself in addition to the rest of us. And then on Matzah, when his Nefesh soul carried our guilt into Sheol to make us innocent before God, he was also carrying and offloading his own. The resolution that Yahweh had established in the Torah applied to the Bokor, the firstborn, as well as to other Bokurim, firstborn children. God didn't change the rule. He applied them. And with Dod, Yahweh enabled the benefits. It is an amazing story. I do want to end our program here, largely because, well, I have ended my analysis of this in the present document. And so I had thought that I had sent a more complete file for this program, so I just must admit that I failed to do so. And I'm 100, maybe even 50 pages beyond this in my translations and commentary, but not on the file that I sent for these translations. And there's so much more that I want to share with you that we'll wait until tomorrow, and I'll send a more complete file, and we'll move on from here as we consider all of the implications associated with this. There is a great deal to consider and learn. Some of the most compelling insights ever are being shared through this terrible event. So I thank you for listening. We'll be with you tomorrow.